Alright, today we are going to replace the wheel bearings on a Corvette C6. If you're watching this video, this is going to be a long, boring video for you. The first thing we're going to do is loosen all the lug nuts on the wheel, and then we jack the car up. Alright, with the car in the air, we can now remove all the lug nuts. Pull the wheel off, and now we're ready to take our caliper off. There's only two ginormous bolts holding the caliper on, and usually once you break them free, there's no Loctite or anything on them holding them in place, just the lock washer. So once you break them free and get them loose, you should be able to unscrew them the rest of the way with your fingers. When you reinstall these, do not reinstall these with any Loctite, red or blue. With the caliper out of the way, the brake rotor will pull right off the old wheel bearing. You can see mine was kind of rusted onto the wheel bearing. Next, we want to disconnect your ABS sensor off of the old wheel bearing, and then just pull that wire out of the harness and throw it off to the side. We'll straighten out the cotter key and pull it out of your ball joint. I believe this is an 18 millimeter. I don't own a Corvette anymore, so I can't go out there and tell you for sure. We're going to unscrew this, but we're going to leave the nut on, because the easiest way to get the ball joint off is to pound on it with a hammer. Don't use a steel hammer, use a brass hammer. And we leave that nut on, so if we take the nut off, we can destroy the threads. So with the nut on, if anything happens to the threads, the nut will put the threads back onto the ball joint, onto a bolt for that matter. So now we're going to loosen the two nuts that hold your hub on. This hub assembly, it's kind of a pain in the ass to get off as well. We're not going to take these nuts off just yet. We're going to do the same thing as we did with the ball joint. So just loosen the nuts up so the nut is hanging over the threads on that bolt that it's mounted to. Because again, our goal is to protect the threads. If you protect the threads, this is going to go back together a lot easier than it came apart. So disregard my last statement, because that nut comes off. This is the one you want to leave on, because this is the one you're going to be beating on later. So as you see, there's just not a lot of room to work on here, but you'll be able to manage. It's not as bad as it looks, and once you're doing it, time really flies. Alright, as you see, the nut's above the threads now. So now when I start beating on that nut, I don't have to worry about messing up the threads. So now I've taken my second floor jack. If you put your car up on jack stands, you'll be able to use just one floor jack. But I lifted up the A-arm, and then I took a dead blow hammer. That's kind of a rubber hammer with lead weight in it, and I used that to hit the A-arm, to knock the A-arm off that upper ball joint. And then I just take the nut off. Again, don't be hitting your A-arm with a steel hammer. You don't want to beat up your freaking Corvette. It's already plastic. And at this one, I'm going to take a brass hammer. And you heard the sound change when when it broke free. Alright, so there's your wheel hub off the car. Now we're going to lock it down into a vise, and we're going to take out the 3 Torx bolts, which hold that, which hold the bearing hub in. By watching this video, you can easily change out your wheel bearings for under 200 bucks a corner. Taking off the rear hub is almost exactly the same as doing the front. There also is a difference between a front wheel bearing and a rear wheel bearing. The rear wheel bearing will have an open center where your axle shaft will slide through.
Oh, shit.
So do not put a rear wheel bearing from a Corvette on the front. Alright, there you go. The wheel bearing's out. So, the wheel bearing that I'm going to replace this with is coming from Advance Auto. I want to say it's right around $120 for the wheel bearing. It's quite possibly the shittiest wheel bearing you could buy for your car. But if you're going to Advance Auto, pretty much everything in Advance Auto is shit. So, the way I see it is, if I can get 50 to 100,000 miles out of this wheel bearing, why do I need to put a more expensive one in there if it does the job? This is an easy job to do. There's no need for you to go out and pay $300, $400, $500 for a wheel bearing when you can get one for $100, and if it breaks tomorrow, you can go get another one for $100 and still have saved money. So I've used these on all four corners of my Vette, and typically I can get over 50,000 miles out of a wheel bearing. So if you do the math, I mean, that's pretty good, and it doesn't cost you really anything. If you have the tools, it might cost you some red Loctite, but that's about it, other than the wheel bearing. And the job's really not that hard. You can do each corner of the car in about an hour, maybe less than an hour. Usually when I'm doing a job like this, I go ahead and replace the rotors as well, but I had recently replaced the rotors on this car. But while you're there, you could do your ball joints, your ball joint tie rod ends. And again, these from the factory, these had red Loctite on them, so you want to reinstall these with red Loctite. Remember, these 3 bolts here are the only 3 bolts holding your wheel onto the car. Notice how easy these bolts are going back into that wheel bearing. Once you put that red Loctite on there, that liquid Loctite is almost acting like a lubricant and allowing these bolts to go right back into the bearing. And then tomorrow, when this red Loctite dries, it'll be almost impossible to get those bolts back out of the hub again. So now we're going to take our hub assembly and we're going to stick it back into the A-arm and then drop it back onto the lower control arm. And like I said at the beginning of this, as long as you don't beat up your car, this thing will go together a lot easier than it came apart. So both of these studs that we're putting the nuts on right now have a hex in the middle of them. So you can stick a socket, an Allen wrench or something in there to hold that stud from spinning while you're tightening down the nut. And I'm sure in your workshop manual there are torque specifications for these 2 bolts. I'm here to tell you, I don't think you can get those 2 nuts tight enough. So I just wrench them down as tight as I can possibly get them. I don't think you can over tighten them. I'm sure there's no possible way that I could over tighten these bolts or these nuts with just the hand tools that I'm using here. I'd be lucky if I'm putting right at 100 foot-pounds on these two nuts. So once you've got your hub assembly back on, go ahead and put your ABS wire and plug it in to your new bearing. So that's ready to go. And then we're going to line up the ball joint for your steering and pop that back in place. And I suggest always use a new cotter key when you're working on anything that takes a cotter key. Always put a new one back in. So we put our rotor on. Now we're going to line up our caliper. And then we have to line the caliper up with the hub assembly, so we can get these two ginormous bolts back into the caliper to hold that caliper on. So this video, start to finish, is about 20 minutes long. And I'm pretty sure it's going to take you at least 40 minutes to an hour to complete this job. Don't rush through it. Pay attention to what you're doing. This is very important. If you screw something up or break something in the process, get it repaired correctly. Anytime you're dealing with suspension, you have the potential of killing yourself going down the highway. So, be careful with what you're doing in this project. Final steps, let's install that wheel. Get our lug nuts on, and this job is pretty much over. So this video is just to show you how easy it is to replace the wheel bearing on your Corvette. There's no need for you to take it to the shop or to any shop and pay somebody $1,000 to do this job that you could easily do in your garage with the tools you have on hand in about an hour. I hope this video was informative to you, and please do watch some of my other videos. And have a nice day.